It's the 19th of October 2022. Welcome, everybody. I'm Dana Durnford, also known as the Nuclear Proctologist.org. You can call in at 709-589-4406, 709-589-4406. Hope everybody had a good day. This Wednesday, we've got so much news to cover, it's ridiculous. And we're going to cover the news we didn't cover last night, because that was a great show, but unfortunately they decided to grow flounders and pretend that they're in water at lethal doses. The industry is absolutely nuts. Senior scientist, irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. 50 becquerels a kilogram. TEPCO confirms steam coming out of the ground at 4.7 sieverts per hour, just 20% more than in June. I'm going to play a Harvard video clip for you. So, 3 sieverts is considered a lethal dose. So how many nuclear scientists do you think was hanging out in Fukushima? Let's play that for you real quick. It's a good video.
And in the US context, we think of REM, and I assume in the Japanese context, people would think of sievert. The fatal dose from whole body exposure, median dose is around 350-400 REM, or 3.5 to 4 sievert.
Delivered pretty quickly.
Delivered over a period of hours, but in that case death would follow over subsequent weeks. And in the US context we think of REM, and I assume in the Japanese context people would think of sievert. The fatal dose from whole body exposure, median dose is around 350-400 REM, or 3.5 to 4 sievert.
Delivered pretty quickly.
Sorry.
But that gives you an indication of the sort of hazard that you're concerned. So a few sieverts, if the dose looks as though it'll be more than 2 or 3 sieverts over a period of plume passage, for example, then you know that you're in a potentially lethal situation. Whereas speaking in microsieverts is not helpful.
So microsievers and unisievers is not helpful. It's dangerous. 4.7 sieverts an hour, the steam coming out of the ground. The whole site would disappear regularly with steam that was lethal doses everywhere. Now, you got to have right conditions to see the steam on top of that, right? Don't forget that part of the story, which is super important. I started out today to put the oil filter in the beak engine and take it out for a test run, see if that would solve the restriction. Because like if your oil is low, the engine won't go past 3,200 RPM, 3,000 RPM. And you top it up, and then it's designed so you make it back into port, right? If you're out on the ocean, it's a safety, right? And so currently the engine is having a safety. I talked to a mechanic today, and he's going to get me in on Monday and give me a diagnosis on the engine. But let's play the video I shot today, because it kind of break up the show a little tiny bit, hopefully. And away we go. It's Tuesday the 18th. I'm headed back home with a couple of filters. changed yesterday for the outboard motor. We're what they call old shop. The old shop. Gonna do an oil change in the big engine. Man, fog is thick over here. Super thick. I was hoping, because that's the ocean right there. I was hoping there's gonna be some birds when I came through this morning. This is like 10 after 9 right now. But the fog is thick, eh? Look at that, wow. So it's the 19th, I guess. Filter. I just changed the filter. Probably can't see it. So this is all today from here on. Putting extra bolts back in, blah, blah, blah. And we'll take it down, put it in the water. See if that's solved it, I guess. Alright, it's the 19th of October. 19th of October, we're going to go try it again. We just changed the oil filter. Let's hope that works. Let's hope that works. So we've been idling for about 10 minutes. Lots of water coming out of it. Lots of water. Alrighty, well, I think it's a little late in the day, right? The wind's just coming up. That's the theory. So get out for a run here this evening. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, the 19th of October. We're just going to idle out and see if we can get this past 3,000 RPM without it having a seizure on us. So it's the reason it's restricted below 3,000 RPMs is that's a safety feature. So it does that if you're low on oil, for instance, right? Let's give her some shot throttle. That's 2,000 RPM. All the lights are off. There's nothing blinking. There's no alarms. We'll find out here in a second. Will it go past 3,000 RPM? It's almost 3,000 right now. Once I get her on course. Wow, it's past 3,000 RPM. Well, no. Dirty bugger, eh? I don't see no lights. Let's get her up and leave her up and see if the lights will come on. That's pretty heartbreaking. You need the lights. The lights should signal, and then you can figure out from the lights what the code is, what the hell is going on, right? So it did show oil. It is showing oil, right? I'm gonna have to go down and get the mechanic to see if he can diagnose what the hell is going on by the looks of things. Better no birds whatsoever. And another thing along the shoreline, seagulls at low tide would pick up mussels and sea urchins and drop them on the pavement and crack them open. There's no mussels and no sea urchins on the pavement. We'll just muck along for a while. It runs fine. Look at this, you know, at under 3,000 RPM. It's completely fine. It sounds great. The motor sounds just fantastic. It's telling me oil, and we just changed the filter. I haven't changed the oil, but just having weak oil, like say if the oil is old, that won't cause same oil again. Look at that, and then it's gone out. Well, I'll change the oil, I suppose.
I'd do it anyway.
I don't know. We'll change the leg oil, I guess, too, while I'm at it. Because we raised the money last night from James. It's just when you only got so much money, you wonder, should you go to the mechanic and get it diagnosed, or should you change the oil and hope that solves it? Because you can't do both, right? That's okay. Not a single bird taking flight. Nowhere. Well, I'm going to change the oil, make sure it's 5 liters going into it tomorrow, and change the leg oil while I'm at it, and I take it out and try it because I can't get into the mechanics until Monday. I got to try to solve it now before Monday. See if I can beat the mechanic, right? That's the plan. It's just something I'm missing that I don't know what it is. Something stupid because it's going in restriction mode, so I'll find it. Or the mechanic will tell me what it is and I'll solve it. One or the other. I'll be out on the water again tomorrow. I'll get it handled on. Officials have meant deadly Fukushima meltdown cover-up. So that's why we got a poll tonight, by the way. Should Japan admit the Fukushima fuel pools at Reactor 4 and Reactor 3 were faked? And despite having 26 people, we only got 18 votes. That's not suspicious at all, is it? So I'll show you Reactor 3 and I'll show you Reactor 4. Hang on, there I get set up. So this is the remains of Reactor 4 to your left. Get myself in there. The fuel pools would be at the very top of the building. This is the official picture. There is no top to the building, despite the fact it's the official picture. That's the remains of Reactor 3, and the fuel pools are the same thing. They're at the very top of the building. And the problem is there's no top to the building. I'll show you the picture that they're trotting around here. Maybe. And I was editing the video, so I forgot to get this part done. Just give me 1 second. So the fuel pools at Reactor 3 will be on top of the building. They claim they got the fuel out of the pool, but that's the stump. That's the remains of it. So zero possibility there's a fuel pool up there invisible at the top of a building that don't exist. So we got a poll. Should they admit the fake in it? And we're going to play that clip of multiple media faking it, which is why we got the poll. Should Japan admit Fukushima fuel pools at Reactor 4 and Reactor 3 were faked? So let's play those little clips here. There's many media done it. This just is 4 of them. Or is not. I screwed that up too today, did I? See if I can fix that. So that's 4 of them pretending they're at the top of a building that doesn't even exist. That's not suspicious, is it? Do the one down in the bottom right-hand corner, and yeah. Well, because we reformatted the computer, I forgot to import. Anyway, let's keep it rolling. One more second. One more second. Would media lie to you? Is the question. It's a billion-dollar question. I don't know.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
She's claiming she's in a fuel pool that doesn't even exist. So we got a poll. Should they admit that they faked it because they faked it? So it's like, why would major medias, many medias, fake something like that, Dana? Because they're crazy. The global energy crisis is contributing to a nuclear renaissance. Zero hedge. Well, look, the global nuclear industry is not contributing to a nuclear renaissance. International Energy Agency says renewables will overtake fossil fuels worldwide and nuclear worldwide by 2026. A record volume of renewable energy expected to come online in 2021 with 290 gigawatts of new capacity, which surpasses 2020 record of 260. Renewables accounted for all of the new electricity capacities installed worldwide, which is equal to 333 nuclear power plants came online last year in renewables. It was 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear. The other 290 and 0.5 was renewables. So claiming there's a nuclear renaissance is incredible. Desperate. 4,800 gigawatts by 2026, from 2020 to 2026 of renewables. Ow. Which is equal to 5,500 large nuclear power plants coming online in 6 years. There's 414 currently worldwide. The Danes, the Swedes, confirm extensive damage to the Baltic Sea Nord Stream pipeline. A massive explosion. Well, yeah, like the theory was you can sabotage it and just blame it on something else because that's what gas does, is it blows up, right? It was sabotaged, most likely by Americans. It was a military operation for sure, right? From what, well, we don't know anything for sure, I guess, but from what Denmark, that the cause of the damage was a powerful explosions. 13 JR rail passes for foreign tourists visiting Japan. So they can get these passes, let them go to Chiba and Fukushima as much as they want, which happens to be major nuclear wastelands. Chiba is just 20 kilometers away from Tokyo. And Guma is a nuclear wasteland. And Aomori is a nuclear wasteland. Tochigi, Ibiragi, Miyagi, Yamagata, Akita, Awati. Majorities are nuclear wastelands. And so lucky tourists get to go there and get poisoned. And Japan makes their few pennies off each of them. And Nagano is a brutal radioactive wasteland. And Niigata too, and Tohoku. put you on a bullet train and rush you there to get radioactive poisoning. And here you see more hype for the drowning uranium industry. Uranium Energy Athabasca deals, which is Saskatchewan, Canada, unprecedented part M&A wave in uranium and nuclear assets. So they're trying to build a hype train. They've been doing this for 11 years since Fukushima. But they got a little bit of attraction now, say. And they got the media at their beck and call. There's nothing the media won't do for the nuclear industry. There's nothing. They already grovel for the last 80 years. There's nothing that they haven't done and won't do. It says it's building a critical mass uranium projects in northern Saskatchewan Athabasca Basin, including the recent $150 million purchase of Rio Tinto, which is in Australia. Correct me if I'm wrong, folks. U.S. energy officials visit Everett Nuclear Research Lab, which is Bill Gates. It's not Bill Gates. Bill Gates has never been there. He's not actually investing the money, and he's able to encourage investors to invest money. In other words, he's a picture on a wall at best. He's not involved in the operations and the designs. But the energy secretary went there to grovel for something for small modular reactors that don't exist. And the only fuel they can use is Russian. But they don't actually exist. Companies bid to develop smaller, safer, less costly sources of nuclear. Scary rhetoric, eh? An Alaska Air Base wants to build micro-nuclear plant for backup. It doesn't exist anywhere on the planet, but they want one right now for backup. You got any idea how ludicrous that assertion actually is? The military wants everything, and they get everything they want, but you can't have something that don't exist, hopefully. Defense Department pursuit of carbon-free power. The nuclear industry has all the governments worldwide claiming it's carbon-free. Has all the media and universities. You can't have a paragraph with the word carbon-free in there somewhere. Since 2015, the whole plan has been brutalized by this propaganda. An Air Force spokesperson, they only got like 29,000 of them, said the planned micro-reactors intended to supplement the current installation energy sources as a redundant, resilient measure to power the base. So you're going to put all your eggs in a basket that don't exist. So you want the backup source in 10 or 15 years, not right now. It's the stupidest. It's the stupidest story imaginable. It's stupid. There's lots of backup power out there that exists. Why are you're trying to create something that doesn't exist? Why are you signing memorandums of understandings for things that don't exist, but end up excluding everything else? It's a disgusting industry. It's a despicable industry. But look at the enormous power that it has. It even got the military out there saying, we're going to get a small modular reactor. Yeah, it don't exist, but we're going to get one. Idiots. Finland eyes small modular nuclear future. And they're in talks with the U.S. Neither one of them has it. Nothing else is allowed to exist. It has to be nuclear, see? Despite the fact that nuclear is dying, literally dying as we're talking. And if you see it dying, make sure you run over and jump on it with both feet. on his head. Make sure it doesn't come back. We'll explore prerequisites for small modular reactors. Somebody should remind all of these clowns that they don't actually exist. There's only one design on paper, but it's not complete. They've been trying this for 50 years. And by doing that, you're excluding everything. Yeah, no, we're going to get a small modular reactor. When are you going to get it? I don't know. They don't got one. Well, why not get something that exists? Well, nuclear industry said we can't. We can only have small modular micro-nuclear reactors. Dana? Are you stupid or something? I reckon so. Small modular reactors. Something that doesn't exist. All of worldwide, we're getting one of those small modular reactors. It's going to be great, Dana. Cheap. Put it on a truck. Don't have to worry about the French going on strike. It's actually 20 French sites, not 11. Today's 20 French nuclear sites are down, they're claiming, because of strikes, but they're down because of corrosion and corruption. Delaying maintenance at 17 different reactors. Today they're saying 20. Power production was also reduced another 1.8 gigawatts at 3 other nuclear reactors. Way to go, French patriotic. Well, what? The country's desperate to get energy? We're in charge? We're going on strike. Give me all the money that you're giving to the EDF, you bastards. Germany to postpone nuclear plant closures. Russia's war in Ukraine fuels energy crisis fears. The energy crisis is because the country's placed in an embargo against Russia's commodities. Not because Russia said no. Despite what the media is trying to, probably successfully manipulating populations. They show you this reactor, but when you zoom, look for an aerial shot, what's the odds a nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms and little communities? What's the odds, Dana? Almost 100%, actually. All the nuclear fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into these farms and onto your planet. You are in serious danger. I got T-shirts below somewhere. Save the insects, ban nuclear power plants. Save the whales, ban nuclear power plants. Save the children, ban nuclear power plants. You think I got those T-shirts because I'm bored? You think I dreamt that up on my own for something to do? 55 fascinating. I'm just saying anybody's never been here. It's because nuclear is killing everything. 55 fascinating facts about sunflowers to make your day brighter. Well, I don't know about you, my day is always brighter when I see a sunflower. There's around 12 million tons. Ukraine is the leading sunflower producer with 14 million tons, followed by Russia with 12 million tons. That's 26 million tons. That's amazing. They faced east in the morning and west in the evening. They follow the sun. That's interesting, I bet. On a cloudy day, young sunflowers face each other because they cannot track the sun. They face each other because they're radiating energy? Wow. Oh, and the biggest lie of all, Sunflower is one of the few plants that can reportedly absorb radiation energy. What are you talking about? Every plant out there absorbs man-made radiation. Not energy, but isotopes. It was planted around areas that were affected by Chernobyl and Fukushima. It was not. Yeah, there's all kinds of fields around the nuclear meltdowns to protect all the baby birds, Dana. NATO, never mind. NATO practices dropping nuclear bombs in Europe. NATO, who's been sending weapons to Ukraine, like serious weapons. There's 30 countries is NATO, which are, according to the books, they're not supposed to exist, right? They were created as a response to Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union was dissolved and all the patents and pensions, NATO should have been dissolved too. Instead, NATO now is the attack dog of UN, which is 195 militaries, which is why Eisenhower called the UN the military-industrial complex. Nuclear deterrent drills occur at the same time as Russia goes nuclear exercise. So NATO's doing a nuclear exercise and Russia's doing a nuclear exercise. What could possibly go wrong? The best way to describe that is idiots. The idiots are out of control on our planet. And they're taking down on us and all the species too. Uranium miners surge on German nuclear plant news. This is desperation headlines were last number of months now in particular. So Germany is going to keep 3 nuclear power plants operational until April. That's it though. But that was enough for the uranium miners' stock markets to surge. Because they artificially pretend that all of a sudden uranium is going to grow or something, right? And then people invest into the uranium stocks. They sell their stocks they got for cheap, take the pensioners' money, and a few days later the bottom falls out. This is 11 years straight of that routine. 11 years. If anybody in the nuclear industry says something positive, then the stocks are artificially inflated by all the brokers worldwide instantly. 3 German nuclear plants will keep running until the spring, and somehow that's a surge. That created a surge in the stock market. Because of 3 lousy plants that don't need any fuel, by the way. They're still running. They'll run on the fuel they got until April. They're not going to get some new fuel. But that's not what they told the investors. They said, no, there's a nuclear degenerate renaissance. Europe is facing high energy prices due to the Ukrainian-Russia war. No, Europe is facing high energy crisis, which is inflation, because they put an embargo against Russia in February. Done it to themselves. Right, but we've seen the narrative in the last month switch to Russia and not the embargo. Maybe 2 out of every 10 stories will acknowledge the embargo, but the majority of them will frame it so that as if Russia had cut them off or something, right? Cooling systems fault causes load shedding in nuclear power plant number 2, Focus Taiwan, which is Taiwan. These are disease factors, right? Following a malfunction in the plant's circulating water system. This is how you have a meltdown, folks. He reassured the public that the nuclear power plant remained safe and that the council failed to provide a concrete repair schedule nor detail the scope of the load shedding problem. So no one knows really what's going on. Oh, there was a load shedding problem. What happened? Well, don't worry about it. And the traveling screens operating with two of the plant's 4 pumps reportedly malfunctioned. 2 of the 4 pumps. Each pump is pumping about 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons a minute. So there's a lot of problems could have happened, and it could be long term. Elon Musk, what a disappointment he turned out to be, didn't he? Supports Russia's keeping Crimea because he's worried about a nuclear escalation and World War III. There's no conflict that's it's either already scripted and we're going to have it, or it's not. There's no conflict that's going to be escalated on this planet. This has to be scripted out in advance, right? The first rocket that hits the Mars should have him on it, but no return ticket. If he's so certain, somebody should occupy his head so that it makes some sense sometimes. If we nuke Russia back, they'll nuke us, and then we got World War III. World War III is nuclear power plants' fuel pools hemorrhaging into the environment 24 hours a day, still splitting the atoms. Each reactor core in the fuel pool, and there's over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, is still splitting the atoms for 1 million homes, but there's no containment. Each fuel pool is boiling off 120 tons of hideous radioactive water each day. You're talking trillions of atoms per liter of dangerous stuff. You're talking hundreds of trillions per liter of short-lived stuff. And none of it's safe, right? 20 French nuclear reactors affected by the strike, the proud union says. Nuclear power plant in Belleville, which is in France, surrounded by farms. Well, that's a coincidence. That's 2 in a row. Huh. Never seen that coming. Wafer scale meets atomic scale. Uncle Sam to test these huge chips in nuclear weapons simulations. So they can do how many trillion computations a second? Hang on. Oh, yeah, with support from Lawrence Livermore, Los Alamos National Laboratories. These are hideous disease factories on vast swaths of land. And they're on top of the biggest aquifers in that part of their countries, or states, or counties. Massive aquifers. And always these aquifers are contaminated since the 50s, and they're feeding the water into farms and cities and communities for the last 70 years. You are being exterminated worldwide in increments. It's called Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and diabetes and Down syndrome. Heart problems, and liver, and lung, and respiratory, and pituitary, and thyroid, and adrenaline. And there's 1,800 illnesses from radioactive poisoning, not just cancer. Dinner plate-sized chips that packed with 2.6 trillion transistors. So it's the size of a dinner plate for a chip, and it can computate 2.6 trillion digits per millisecond, microsecond, who knows. David Simpson, scary talk in a nuclear sponge. So the nuclear sponge, so some places out there to give nuclear weapons to because they want the so-called enemy to shoot at the so-called useless dummy target, right? So they give them nuclear weapons, but they probably don't have a nuclear in the weapon itself, right? These are considered distractions for hostiles. And they happen to be one of those big targets. Myanmar nuclear ambitions, we covered this about a month ago. Russia's going to give them a nuclear reactor. This junta that's extremely repressive and violent. If you look at the Rohingyas that they ostracized and driven out of the country with barbaric acts of violence, is known to us as the regional peace destabilizer. Yeah, they'll send 600 troops. If someone shoots one of their troops, they'll send 600 troops into the community. They'll burn down all kinds of impoverished people's homes. It's a reign of terror, right? But apparently they got useful attributes for the military-industrial complexes worldwide, and so they helped them proliferate. Giving them nuclear power is nuts. I guess who wants to give it to them? The crazies. So equating Myanmar with North Korea, will the world be able to deal with another North Korea? And I was thinking about that. I was thinking exactly about that. So how Japan took control of Korea. It was actually started around 1904 and 1945, and then the United Nations went in there. So North Korea has been enslaved or complete sanctions for over 100 years, 110, 114 years. It's been repressed. The United Nations went in there in the early 50s, UN, and they flattened every community and they left nothing standing in the entire country. Every city and every village was flattened with napalm. They burnt it and incinerated it, everything. So when you do that, that's collective punishment. It's mostly women and children and civilians, right? And the idea was to put the pressure on the government. But then now they got 70 years of embargo on top of them. And so now these, this is a repressed nation. You had millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, and millions of orphans caused by United Nations. And they burnt down and destroyed all the infrastructure of the country. And then land, sea, and air embargoes for the last 7 decades. And North Korea has never attacked anybody in 70 years. But the countries with the embargo have never stopped. America has 900 military bases worldwide. But United Nations orchestrated that. And so United Nations showed its true color by refusing to leave the country alone. The country built weapons because nuclear weapons had no choice. You made it do that. You constantly bombarded it with threats and everything else. And land, sea, and air embargoes. And you're not punishing the military, you're punishing all the civilians again in the entire country who don't have a say. Will the world be able to deal with another North Korea? No. Would the world be able to deal with another China, another American, another Russian? North Korea hasn't attacked anybody for 70 years, so shut up. Shut your mouth. It's like so absurd. All the Hollywood movies use North Korea as a narrative all the time. Estonia could get a nuclear power plant by 2035. And look at the picture that they got drawn up. This is just a rendition. A small Hitachi, look at that up there, and a small modular reactor. So they want to exclude everything but nuclear. They don't want anything else, no wind, no solar, no geothermal, no hydro, just nuclear. This is walking papers they got from the World Economic Forum recently in a bunch of articles, right? And so that's telling the lapdogs what they want. Nuclear power plant working group is being... I'm missing, hang on. Is basing its funding on the idea that Estonia will give up on shale oil production by 2030. So, they're thinking down, obviously, way down the road. This is how this group works. And then they try to manifest it. Solar and wind will not fill the gap on their own. And I showed you earlier, that's exactly what solar and wind, if you pair it up with storage, like water batteries where you have two reservoirs and just keep circulating the water with excess energy, and compressed air pumped hydro. But I mean, if you can replace every coal, gas, oil plant on the planet with geothermal if you had the will. If you spent a tenth of the money that you spend on fusion, just a tenth of the money on fusion and on nuclear each year, you can start replacing all gas, oil, and coal with geothermal, because you can use the money to come up with techniques to drill down. If you took 1,000 universities and try to get the kinks of how do you drill down and tap into geothermal where the drill bits don't work anymore, you would probably figure it out that day. No, they're going to put all their hopes and dreams on a small modular reactor that don't even exist. Discussions about small modular reactor plants has been discussed for several years. No, discussed all day, every day, everywhere, as if this was the golden ticket. They don't even exist. And if they do exist in the future, it's going to be mixed oxide fuel. When you take it out of the reactor and put it in a pool, it's bye-bye to any species left on this planet. It's a despicable pollution machine when it's running on top of that. Not only that, the small modular reactors are 35% more high intermediate dangerous level waste, 30 times more high level waste, dangerous waste, and 5 times more fuel rods when you scale it up to the conventional reactors. These are nothing but 100% genocide, omnicide disease factories. Expected to be built by private investors, because they got lots of confidence in the government. Oh, we're not going to do it. They'll get private investors to do it. This is what we've been hearing. Again, this meant to raise money, see? But it's propaganda. It's outrageous propaganda. And it's desperation, obviously. The industry is desperate. Family Nuclear Science Night at Idaho National Laboratories provides hands-on experience for students. That's a picture from the 50s or something by the looks of it, isn't it? Simpson Boulevard. That's a good name for a disease factory. It's open to the first 350 people to register. Why do you got to register? Invited to meet real scientists. Do I need to say any more? You're going to meet real scientists. Honey, get the kids. They're going to get to meet real scientists. It's going to be amazing. We're going down to one of the biggest disease factories in Idaho. And Idaho National Laboratory, of course, is right on one of the biggest aquifers in Idaho. It's been, like all of these places, polluted since the 50s. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to mitigate it. Decades after they poisoned everybody within 10,000 miles. Try making that all up on your own. Just I double dare you. Real scientists. Oh, wow. Like, scientists, if you actually look at scientists, they're frightening. They're the last people you want for a neighbor. Let's put it that way. Interested parents should register their whole family. Nuclear industry, I got to give them credit. They're the paranoid till the end, eh? Anybody with the last name Abdullah is not getting in. Students will be given a coloring book from the nuclear industry, folks. From a disease factory on top of that. A passport book of activities to complete and earn a stamp at the nuclear disease factories. And they can get pins for their lanyards and other freebies. It gets worse. Activities and events will include building edible atoms at a nuclear dump site, folks. These are scary people that are bringing our children into these, or even going where our children are, into schools and showing them fuel rods, for God's sakes. Viewing a cloud chamber. I'm so excited I almost peed myself. Suiting up in personal protective equipment. They're trying to make the children grow up and not hate their guts like everybody else on the planet does, see? It's creepy. That is so creepy. Creating a candy nuclear reactor. I gotta do it again because a candy nuclear reactor. Creating a candy nuclear reactor. I can't actually get over that one. I don't know if I can ever forgive him for doing that. That is some real sickness in the nuclear industry. They should all be locked up. These are dangerous people. Family Nuclear Science Night is held in celebration of Nuclear Science Week, which is the third week of October every year. We're here to make sure that they get off to a great start. That's what we're up to. Nuclear Wonkaland. Thank you, James. Solar and wind compensate for decline of hydro and nuclear in the EU output. Get a load of this story. Because you hear them screeching nuclear or wind and solar are no good. In the EU, you hear them saying that all the time. Scum, man. Hang on, I got to put that over there with the propaganda section. There's evil and then there's the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry is, it's levels above an evil, man. New study that solar and wind have helped to mitigate the impacts of the droughts across the European Union, France included, amid a 21% decline in hydropower and 19% reduction of nuclear. Wind and solar generated a record 24% of the block's electricity from March to September, aka right through summer. Wow, that's embarrassing for the nuke degenerate industry, I bet. France got over half their fleet down. On top of this, the record increase in wind and solar compared to last year avoided the need for 8 billion cubic meters of fossil gas at a cost of 10.8 billion US. So wind and solar, which everybody in the nuclear industry admits is useless, saved the EU 8 billion cubic meters of fossil gases. 8 billion cubic meters. I absolutely hate the nuclear industry a whole lot more after reading that, folks. Haunted by 67 nuclear tests, just one of them was equal to the Castle Bravo on Bikini Island, was equal to over 1,000 Hiroshimas. 1,000. I'm sorry, Nagasaki, which is a plutonium bomb. So saying there's 67 nuclear tests, now you gotta go, well, 1,067. But a lot of those 67s were megatons, which meant there was probably 7,000, the animosity equivalent to 7,000 Nagasaki bombs went off in the Bikini Atoll. Well, Dana, that would be insane, Dana, if that was true. If that was true, Dana, then that would probably contaminate, like 1 million square kilometers or something of radioactive fallout would contaminate over 1 million square kilometers. Huh. I actually got a study from 2019 that actually shows that. We zinged. 67 deadly catastrophic events, not nuclear tests. There's no such thing as a nuclear test. It's a nuclear war. It's the same bombs, same radioactive fallout. Calling it a test is just saying, if you say it's a test, most people go like, oh, it was a test. Brain freeze. That was a nuclear war where he shot around 7,000 Nagasaki bombs. And he shot it at the Bikini Atoll, which ended up with over 1 million square kilometers, still contaminated 70 years later. Like Montebello in Australia, 70 years later, 260 islands, and you can't go there for more than an hour because of radiation. Every facet of nuclear is humiliating. That there's people like that on our planet anywhere, and they're not locked up is the scary part. First U.S. nuclear plant built in decades, on track to produce energy. You got any idea how many times he actually said that statement? The first nuclear plant to be built in the U.S. in 30 years. Is on track. It's, I can't remember how many years, a decade or whatever, behind schedule. It's 4 or 5 times the budget that they originally allocated for it. And Westinghouse went bankrupt in the U.S. branch of it. The French Polynesian atolls are still weary decades after nuclear tests. Everybody, every single person in the French Polynesian islands was severely irradiated. Let me see if I can find it. That's the crazy thing about this subject is there's no shortcuts, right? It's nuclear, and you got to treat it with the respect, and you can't just cliche something when it comes to nuclear. You got to be honest about it, right? French and France. Here we go. What else we got? Oh, this is pretty good. Nuclear is disgusting anyway. French nuclear tests exposed the entire French Polynesian population to radiation. The sandstorms from the Sahara Desert, which France destroyed with radiation, blows all the way back to France. And France, after decades, finally passed out 6 million or something radioactive iodine pills because they were having all these reactors showing vicious flaws, and they were expecting they could have a major accident. So they ended up having to order, and when was 2019? This is the first time they've done that, by the way. La Hague, which is the fuel reprocessing facility, which is a major disease factory for the Arctic on top of that, and France and Europe, has 500 security guards. 500. How many security guards? Do you have 500 security guards at coal plants, Dana? No. At oil plants? No. At gas plants? What are you, crazy? 500 security guards because of how evil they actually are. They don't want anybody even getting a picture of that disease factory. The new High Commission to the French Polynesians calls for support, compensation for the atolls due to the test of France's nuclear weapons test. And so they're not very wealthy islands, right? And so they've located $17,000 for genetic studies. They want France to pay for it. But it's going to be really difficult to get a big academic team together to do a proper study for $17,000. You can do it, but the industry will just take that money and burn it, and they'll give them no relief. There was 190 nuclear weapons used in the war. They call it a test from 1966 to 96 to 96. 1996. What France done is the same as Britain, where they went to another area and just raided it, the entire population. United Kingdom went over to the Christmas Islands. The disease that never stops giving misery. Jerry Goodings, who's with the anti-nuclear organization, anti-nuclear, anti-nuclear is what they call people they're terrified of. As people of conscience, as a person with a moral high ground, that's what an anti-nuclear is. It's somebody to be proud of, someone that has the moral high grounds. Victims who have died, and children that have cancer. Cancer is not the only thing that's going to show up. My goodness, there's 1,800 illnesses. And although they were born after the nuclear test, and that's why the association is asking for a transgenerational study into the genetic impact of the victims. Macron went to ask forgiveness in Algeria, but they won't tell him where they buried all the nuclear waste. But he didn't ask forgiveness from the French Polynesian islands. And all of them were incredibly radioactive. Forever. The babies, they call them jelly babies. It's just hideous. And they knew what they were doing on top of it. It's on purpose to study them for generations. It shows a complete lack of reality. That's what the nuclear industry reminds us every single day. The military medical expert said there was cancer before nuclear testing. Cancer epidemic started in the early 1970s after a couple of hard decades of nuclear open air testing from multiple countries, right? But that was the takeoff point, was the 70s, where it went like madness. And so the arrogance to come out and say there was cancer before the nuclear test is suggesting nuclear tests didn't cause any cancers, which is, cancer is just one of 1,800 illnesses. Again, right? They box you in to this little dungeon of just acknowledging cancer. It's a very, very well thought out. That's why they hire a lot of psychiatrists. Nuclear engineering melter starts up at U.S. Hanford site. I was like, what? Wait, no, that can't be possible. It's a low-level melter. They're not. Now they're going to make glass, and then they're going to put nuclear waste in the glass, and they're going to seal it and let it cool off, and then they have nuclear waste stored in glass. Glass won't break down. If it's the element, it won't break down for who knows how many years, right? But we're talking about nuclear. And the problem with nuclear is called Wigner effect. It's called neutron bombardments. It breaks down the integrity of metal. I'm sure it'll break down the integrity of glass. It can't work the way they claim it is. But guess who built it and who runs it? You guessed it, Bechtel. The lunatics at Bechtel. U.S. Hanford site vitrification plant has started heating the first of two 300-ton melters. The $17 billion plant's low-activity waste facility, not low nuclear activity or low-activity nuclear waste facility. They didn't even put the word nuclear in it. With the goal of starting to treat radioactive waste now by the end of 2023. So they got all kinds of... Once they fire it up, they can't get back into the building, basically. So they do all these just using glass only for a year and make sure they get the kinks out of the system. The first melter, construction of the first melter started 20 years ago. And it must now remain hot continuously as it initially makes practice glass and then begins vitrifying low-level radioactive waste. But this is low-level compared to fuel rods. It's not low-level. They're not putting it in glass because it's harmless. But particularly the fuel rods that they're going to be putting in glass, the neutrons are going to destroy the integrity of the glass in just a few years. At best, say 2 decades. It'll completely destroy the integrity of it. Low activity, radioactive waste facility. This, again, they're not going to vitrify harmless radiation. This has to be harmful radiation. Department of Energy goal is to start vitrifying radioactive waste stored in underground tanks. Well, because you can't vitrify the billions and billions and billions of gallons they dump directly into the soil in the 50s and 60s. Or they can't vitrify the 41 miles of unlined trenches they dumped it into also for decades, because that's all ran down into the Columbia River and washed down into all the communities. The underground tanks were there since World War II. They were only built to last a couple of years. They're underground because they wanted to stop the neutron bombardment from radiating everybody up at the surface, right? So when you put all this nuclear sludge in these million-gallon tanks, it's a lot of it, the heavy particulates, the gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas settle on the bottom. And eventually that's going to start a criticality, a chain reaction on its own, a spontaneous chain reaction. Because neutrons are bombarding, you got all the other elements, few particulates right there, and you have some small chain reactions take place. That'll burn a hole through the tank right away. And everything runs out. But even if that didn't happen, but it certainly did in every tank, if that didn't happen, the tanks, if you put a tank in the ground since World War II, you can't take it out of the ground. It's going to fall apart. It's going to rust apart. They could theoretically rust apart in 5 or 6 years because they were only built to last 2 years. And was surprised they even done that because they had just spent decades of dumping it in the pits and directly into the soil. They hold 56 million gallons of waste until it can be treated or for disposal. So the vitrification plant is supposed to vitrify the stuff that's in the tanks. This is a 585 square mile nuclear wasteland on top of that. And this is not, they're not actually going to do that. You start pumping that through pipes to the vitrification site, then you can no longer get near the pipes. Which means you got no-go zones all over the site. Heating up the first smelter to 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. The glassified radioactive waste is produced will be buried at the integrated disposal site, which is a lined landfill in central Hanford. Well, how long do you think the lining is going to last in the ground? 20 years? How long is the glass supposed to last? Oh, a couple of 100,000 years? And Bechtel built it, which means it has zero credibility. Should you buy BWX's technology stock at around $55? No. Anything to do with nuclear, that's a dying industry. And you can tell by the desperation of almost every one of their stories, you see this incredible desperation. A supplier of nuclear components and fuel. That's a dying industry. There's 1,000 better things you can invest your money in, guaranteed to get a good return and not poison every species on the planet for 1 million years. Calls for cleanup grow after nuclear waste found at a North County grade school. It's not just the school, it's all the homes around it too. And the parents are calling for a cleanup. You can't clean up a nuclear contaminated building. You definitely can't clean up a nuclear contaminated school, because it would have already infiltrated, on top of that, all the ventilation systems. It permeated into the infrastructure, the playgrounds, and everything else. The industry is insane. Don't look for common sense in a nuclear story. And the random times you do it, it'll actually hurt your head. Parents are expressing concern of radioactive elevated levels. It will elevate it. I'm concerned and I don't want to take my son back to school. Well, that's pretty good of you. I agree with you. We'll take him somewhere else. Radiation levels given off by the material are 22 times higher than the levels of radiation naturally occurring. The stuff, the natural emitters are completely different from the man-made anthropogenic stuff. Right? To make that statement there is a complete dishonest way to frame this narrative given off by the soil. It's not 22 times more radioactive than the naturals, because they're completely different. They got nothing to do with it. My Geiger counter is not going to register potassium or magnesium or calcium or any other natural element. It only measures man-made elements. However, radiation testing consulting firm that spoke to News 4 on the background and asked the company not be mentioned by name said the report used a national average background level and not the background levels found in the Missouri soil, which had a higher than average level. In other words, he's telling in a roundabout way, without implicating the company he works for, that this is madness. Get the children out of there without saying that, right? He just made it orders of magnitudes. Uranium from atomic weapons processed in St. Louis, radioactive waste was dumped in piles from atomic weapons production. Near Lambert Street and the Lewis International Airport, where rain and wind swept it into nearby Coldwater Creek. How many times have we heard this same story, I wonder? 1,000? It's believed the floodwaters from the creek deposited radioactive waste on the school grounds and in neighborhoods along the creek over the years, over and over and over and over. And so how many children living along that creek and families have been poisoned downstream, for instance? It's a lot. Could have increased risk of some types of cancer. But there's 1,800 other illnesses. It's not just cancer. So when you see something like that, right, that's mitigation, that's betrayal, that's sedition, and that's sadistic, right? Whoever participated in the article are absolute monsters. For people who play, like kids, right? Or lived there and moved away even. Madness. Concern is outback South Australia grows as federal government plans to store defence waste at Kimba dump. And Kimba is prime farmland. The nuclear industry prefers prime farmland that's active because everything is repackaged, and so there's a lot of emissions. So if it gets sucked up by the food and you ship it out of there all the time, the nuclear industry doesn't look as bad as the evil that it actually is. And so the Australia wants a whole bunch of nuclear reactors because they're worried about someone's going to invade them, right? Who's going to invade Australia again? Oh, that's right, nobody. Well, the United Kingdom invaded them and then blew up nuclear weapons. Well, waited for the wind to blow across all of Australia and then detonated their nuclear weapons over and over and over. So now they're talking about a pebble-based nuclear reactor orbiting above on a space station. This is like, how would you put it? Well, again, this is posturing. Right, so like they're trying to, and they've been pretty successful infiltrating every facet of everybody's lives worldwide. So they're talking about small modular reactors. They're investing in another U.S. company racing to win a competition. racing to win a competition to build the first small modular reactors in Washington. And they're disgusting, those nuclear companies down there. I've had a number of deals with them over the last couple of years. They're despicable people. The British gave Rolls-Royce $200 million to develop the small modular reactors. There's zilch possibility you're going to develop a small modular reactors with $200 billion. It's actually zero. Not nil, but zero. Yeah, they got nukes in space for the last 50 years, absolutely. But not nuclear reactors, right? But nuclear weapons, there's no doubt about it. Who knows what the Soviet Union still got up there floating around. Green energy profits, the case for uranium. So they're calling uranium green energy in this mining article. That's an agenda, right? And we've only seen this narrative over the last couple of years. It's surreal to try to equate nuclear with green energy. And that's what they're up to lately, I notice. Liz Truss's agenda is dead. German nuclear power is revived. No, they extended it till April. And the North Korean boy band still got to serve in the military-industrial complex. NATO will send fighter jets to Ukraine eventually. They're sending everything but fighter jets and tanks. Everything. They're sending all the weapons that can kill a fighter jet and a tank. NATO's 30 different countries. Canada, unfortunately, is poor Canada. We lost our country to the nuclear industry in the 70s. We don't actually have a country. NATO nations will eventually provide Ukraine with the most potent conventional weapons, aka nuclear. Population decline is turning Earth into a ghost town, experts say. Population decline worldwide is what they're claiming. That's what the big shots are saying. Young people are getting way more cancer than old people. Yeah, because Japan is shipping food from the nuclear wasteland worldwide. They haven't stopped, right? They've doubled their exports from pre-Fukushima numbers. It's horrific what they've done over the last decade. I absolutely despise the nuclear industry in Japan in particular. New York Times op-ed says population decline may make climate change easier to combat. He said rising prosperity increases fossil fuel consumption, not fertility rates. Op-ed says population decline will make it easier to... The only way you can slow down climate change is if you try to capture the isotopes released for the last 70 years. The article titled, U.S. population growth is nearly flatlined. Is that so bad? Is that so bad? Yes, it is. Climate graphic of the week. Enough to make you sick, isn't it? World Weather Agency sounds alarms on dams, power, and nuclear plants. And we've seen examples like, so France wants to build more nuclear reactors, but their rivers are so lacking in water because the glaciers are almost gone, they're dependent upon it, that they had to close down another 6 reactors in the summer because they didn't have water to cool it. And they kept other reactors running despite the fact that they acknowledged that the rivers were so hot they were in danger of killing all the life, not counting what the nuclear industry is going to pump back in every day. which is 1 million gallons a minute. Climate graphic of the week. That don't make you sick, what does? World Weather Agency. That scares me whenever I see stuff like that, because it's usually almost always traced back to UN. Not all the time, but almost. So nuclear plants, water stress and floods place infrastructures at significant risk. The whole story is a risk. Extreme weather caused by Fukushima's was the accelerating factor, right? What are we doing here? The largest U.S. reservoir. I'll get to it. Lake Mead, which is the largest U.S. reservoir and is near Las Vegas. Stephen Young's in Las Vegas. I was talking to Stephen Young today, actually. Nice chat. And he said it's a long, brutal recovery ahead of him. And it's only recently that he's seen any little improvements. But he's a trooper, right? He's still trying his best every day. Doing everything right. So Las Vegas is right alongside of multiple nuclear detonations. And I think I got a maps or something, yeah. So you got Nevada test site and Lake Mead. Lake Mead is an important lake, right? You got Las Vegas Lake, which is right alongside of Lake Mead, and then you got Nevada test site. So you had huge pollution by one of the biggest aquifers, the largest U.S. reservoir, and it's near catastrophic releases at the Nevada test site. It's disappointing, isn't it? It's disappointing, and you got Santa Susana is not that far away from Lake Mead. And Santa Susana was equal to 460 3-mile islands melting down at the same time worth of radiation released into the environment. Yeah, 459 times the amount of radiation released during the meltdown at 3-Mile Island. That was a sodium reactor on top of that. But look at all of these communities in harm's way on top of that. Around Santa Susana, right? Stuff like that freaks me out. And so Lake Mead runs all the way down to the bottom. So you know there's going to be a huge amount of radiation down in this area, because a lot of the weapons testing and everything else would have got washed down into that the industry is really good at being incredibly evil. So you were able to get hotel rooms where you can watch the nuclear test, folks. That freaking blows me away that they were that evil. That blows me away. There's evil and then there's nuclear, and there's nothing out there comes close to nuclear. London mortgage bill may rise by £8,000 a year, warns a think tank. The majority of the think tanks, by the way, are just degenerate military-industrial complexes. Not all, but the majority of them are. And so that's going to be caused by building reactors and having fixed prices. It's the stupidest thing you can do. It's the longest, slowest, idiotic process. And France, which is going to build it, can't even maintain their own reactors that are breaking down as quick as you can. Camco and Brookfield Renewables. Well, first off, Camco doesn't have any renewables. It's a strictly military-industrial complex machine for uranium and fuel. Brookfield has bought renewables. It bought Westinghouse in 2017, was it? 2018? When did Westinghouse go bankrupt? Hang on. Oh, God, and where did I put that? I know. I think I know. Just give me 1 second. Ooh. Oh, I know. No, it's not there. Gotta be right about here. Yeah, I think we'll find it. Maybe I shouldn't think so much. Gonna do this the hard way, are we? Anyway, it don't matter. Well, it does matter because I can normally find out right away. One more go. There we go. Paladin. Westinghouse. Westinghouse bankruptcy will kill U.S. nuclear expansion plans in India. 2017. Yeah, 2017. But Camco and Brookfield bought it for almost $8 billion. Every credible net zero pathway relies on significant growth in nuclear power. Because now they're trying to hawk it in the future. So they're trying to give it some street creds. But the claim that every credible net zero pathway relies on significant growth in nuclear power, this is absurdness. Oh, that's right. It's Tim Gitzel. We've covered Tim several hundred times over the last number of years. Tim's got as much credibility as Shinzo Abe. I had to watch Shinzo Abe's assassination last night for like 20 minutes before I finally fell asleep. That's what I do when I can't sleep, is I'll watch Shinzo Abe over and over and over, getting assassinated. Yeah, I might enjoy it a little bit, but it's research. To acquire Westinghouse, a global nuclear service. Look, if Westinghouse was profitable, they wouldn't have sold it. They wouldn't have got out of the business. They got out of the business because their conscience caught up to them. Like they got a conscience. And there's a lot to that story that we're not going to cover. Nuclear energy is becoming increasingly important in a world that prioritizes electrification, decarbonization, and energy security. Well, Tim. You weasel, you. He even looks like a weasel, right? I think his first job was a used car salesman. Will own 51%. Brookfield will own 51%. Interest in Westinghouse, and Camco will own 49%. So, I can't remember, but wasn't Brookfield just a management organization of assets? And then they took all the money and then invested it in the nuclear industry. Twice. $7.8 billion, and claiming that every credible net zero pathway relies on significant growth in nuclear power. No, you just put all your eggs in one basket, and your life depends on growth. Your bonus paychecks and everything else depends on growth. Transition investing. It is an essential, reliable, zero-carbon technology that directly displaces fossil fuel Well, each power plant needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants, large ones, to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, dedicated. And then for 60 years to decommission it after. So the claim that you're displacing fossil fuel is a ludicrous assertion. And the amount of fossil fuel you use is just to build the plant mitigates any carbon the plant might save it doesn't save it, it's a disease factory. It's hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day. And supports the growth of renewables by providing critical base load to our grids. Yeah, which can easily be done with renewables over and over and over. Pumped hydro, compressed air storage. You can even store energy underwater. An estimated 400 gigawatts additional nuclear capacity will be needed by 2050. 400 gigawatts. So they can get their money back, right? Well, there was 290 gigawatts of renewables came online last year, and a half a gigawatt of nuclear. So why did Westinghouse sell? Well, they sold because they know it's not profitable, and they know it's evil. They're talking 28 years from now. They need 400 gigawatts. Between 2020 and 2026, renewables will produce over 4,800 gigawatts of renewables in just a 6-year period. So they're looking for the best way to destroy your investments. You can go with Camco and Brookfield. More than 50 gigawatts of plants extensions have been announced to date. More than 60 gigawatts of new built reactors expected 2020 to 2040. But you won't see that because by 2026, renewables... I done the math on that, I think I did. So you would need to build... Where's the number 2? What have I got done here? 400 divided by 28. What was the... Yeah, so 28 years. So you got 400 reactors in the next 28 years. Means you got to build 14 reactors a year. Large reactors each year and bring them online. Good God, man. Do you got any idea how stupid it is to suggest that the nuclear industry could do that? They actually don't have the manpower. They don't have the suppliers. They don't have the infrastructures to pull that off. Once again, this is what the industry is really good at, is just being scum. So 60 gigawatts of new built reactors. They got extensions for 50 gigawatts. But that's not going to last 30 years down the road. 60 gigawatts of new builds are expected by... So now you got to fill in... that's just a fraction of what you're claiming you're going to need. Multi-decade growth opportunity. Again, this is incredible nonsense. And I feel bad for whoever's money Brookfield is management and is throwing it away on this disaster known as nuclear. Nuclear is a disaster. David Hahn, the 17-year-old, built a backyard nuclear reactor. Now, they say that that's from using meth when he got older, right? But he was... he built his first reactor by going out and stealing... let me go through some of it. This is a super interesting story. Building a nuclear reactor in his backyard, the 17-year-old irradiated his mother's house and his neighborhood with his breeder reactor. He participated in Eagle Scout. As an Eagle Scout, he aimed to earn a merit badge in the Eagle Scout, a merit badge in atomic energy. That's pretty disgusting that Boy Scouts and Eagle Scouts and that were passing out atomic energy badges. That shows you how anal the nuclear industry actually is. Around his 15th birthday, he was awarded his Atomic Energy Merit Badge. Encouraged by this stupid badge, he decided to create a breeder reactor. He built it in his mom's backyard. He wrote letters, I love this, posing as a high school physics teacher, Professor Hans, and tricked various nuclear agencies officials, high-level officials, to provide him with vital information related to nuclear reactors. Scary how complacent this industry actually is. He wrote to the Department of Energy, the American Nuclear Society, the Atomic Industrial Forum, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and Edison's Electrical Institute, and got the information to build a reactor, posing as somebody that didn't exist. As a high school professor at a high school, and he even gave Chippewa High School. And he sent them to the officials who replied back, providing David with the vital information. He even managed to engage in a scientific discussion via mail with Donald Erb, the NRC's agency director of isotope production and distribution. I found him. I went looking for him. Sure enough, Erb is right there. He was an instructor for the non-regulatory agencies. He even managed to engage in scientific discussion with a moron. He wanted to have a breeder reactor that can transform thorium and uranium into fissionable isotopes using radioactive material and the information gathered. He built a neutron gun by boring out a block of lead. Searching for radioactive material, he extracted radioactive isotopes from various household items, folks, and also obtained black ones from Czechoslovakian firms. He managed to extract a good quality of radium from a vintage clock. Frightening. And to obtain radioisotopes, he wrote to the Czechoslovakian firm that sells uranium to commercial and universities, claiming to be a professor. He started amassing a small amounts of radioactive material from various household items, americium from smoke detectors, tritium from gun sights, thorium from camping lanterns. Yeah, the industry, instead of putting it in a dump, it made it into stuff that you might buy, not knowing the difference. It's just horrifying. To purify the thorium ash using lithium, he brought $1,000 worth of lithium batteries. That cracks me up. He managed to obtain a good quality of radium from an old table clock with a tinted green dial that he brought from an antique shop. And inside the clock was a vial of uranium paint. He managed to purify and extract uranium from it. Now his radium gun was ready. Excited to use his radium gun to bombard the thorium-uranium powers, hoping to produce fissionable atoms. He's a maniac, just like every other nuclear scientist. His homemade reactor never reached critical mass, but it began emitting 1,000 times more radiation than normal. Whenever they use the word normal background radiation, that offends me. Alarmed at this unprecedented radiation levels, he started dismantling his project. And after a number of hits and misses, he managed to create a breeder reactor in his potting shed laboratory. And within a few weeks, the Geiger counter registered quite a high level of radioactivity, but it never reached critical mass. The Geiger counter began detecting radiation through cement. He realized he was putting himself and others in danger. And he took advice from a friend and inserted cobalt drill bits to control the nuclear reaction, cobalt drill bits for control rods. But they weren't enough. And now the Geiger counter could register radiation from 5 houses down from his mom's house. He decided to dismantle it and left the radium and americium in the shed. And packed the rest of his equipment into the trunk of his car, but his neighbors called the cops on him. Because you can be sure he looked creepy as shit walking around the neighborhood. He had a chance encounter with the police, which wasn't chance. The cops, someone called the cops, right? They had to have a Superfund site to clean up his mom's backyard and the neighborhood. Yeah, hard cases, folks. The Federal Radiological Emergency Response Plan was implemented. Many government agencies sprang into action, including the FBI, the NRC. David's backyard laboratory was sealed and a Superfund cleanup took place. They were dumped at a facility in the middle of the Great Salt Lake Desert. I forgot to look that up. I got to look that up. This was followed by a breakup with his girlfriend and then his mother's suicide. I'm shocked that the nuclear industry didn't hire him. He was motivated, and he was a maniac, and he was motivated. I guess the nuclear industry felt he would make them look bad because he was crazier than they were. You suppose that was what's really happening? In 2007, the FBI learned he was trying to build another nuclear reactor, collecting americium from stolen smoke detectors, which is one of the biggest crimes on the planet, was putting americium in everybody's smoke detectors, rather than put it in a nuclear dump for 240,000 years. So they charged him with larceny and sentenced to 90 days in jail. He died due to fatal intoxication. They're claiming he died from drug use, but that's what radiation illness, bad contamination would look like. Like if you were hands-on with this stuff, that's exactly what you would look like. Investigators believe that the source might be from the exposure to radioactive material. I'm going to say that's probably what it was. The industry probably killed him because he was better than they were. And we know the industry has a legacy of misery. That's its entire existence based upon misery. And if you look at the 14 prefectures where food was banned for a decade, Canada lifted restrictions. 55 countries banned 14 large prefectures. Boris Johnson lifted all the restrictions with the shake of a hand. The US done the same thing. The EU done the same thing, all within a 1-year period. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. So let's go back to the poll. We got a poll. It's not like the other polls on the planet. Our poll is different. Should Japan admit Fukushima fuel pools at reactor 4 and reactor 3 were faked? Oh, I think they should. So this is just a handful of the media pretending they're at a fuel pool that doesn't even exist. You know it's bad when they're doing stuff like that, folks. You know it's catastrophic, rather, when there all the media worldwide has perpetrated that deception. They took it to a different level where the CBS, BBC, CNN, ABC Australia, and many, many medias came out and pretended, the medias, not just the journalists, the fake journalists, but the medias. Cecilia Vega is now in the White House press club, right? She works at the White House. And being evil got kickbacks, apparently. Seth Dorn from CBS, PBS, is a senator's son, for God's sakes. Rupert Winfield Hayes, he'd done the same thing for Reactor 3. These buildings don't even exist. There's Reactor 3, for God's sakes. There is no fuel pools. They were at the top of the buildings. There is no top to the buildings. Same with Reactor 4. And so the poll was, should they stop faking it and admit that they faked it? We got a stunning 54 votes. Should Japan admit Fukushima fuel pools were faked? And the industry is going to come out and try to muddle the documentation, but we know, right? We know. So tomorrow I'm going to change the oil on the big engine, change leg oil on the big engine, and I'm going to do the small engine on the weekend. I got to go to the hospital in the city on Friday and get that MRI. We won't get, I don't think I'll get the results for about 2 weeks. But we get it and we can find out, because I'm doing everything right. We changed their diets and all this other stuff. I'm not looking forward to it, but we'll get it. It's got to get done. I am kind of looking forward to, I just don't like being irradiated by this disgusting industry. And so that was a great poll. I appreciate everybody's participation. And Stephen Young donated $50 today. Thank you, Stephen. And James Lucid donated $200 last night, Canadian dollars. And that's a big deal. So now we can, that does cover the expenses for the motors. Now Monday, the motors, I'm supposed to take the motor down to the mechanic. I had to call him. If he can't do it Monday, he'll do it Tuesday. He's going to get me in, he said, and do a diagnosis just to find out so he can get me back on the water. But I haven't given up hope that I can solve it myself yet. It's something stupid anyway. And I do a lot of work, right? So we'll be back tomorrow night. Tomorrow night's the last show of the week. Let's play some out music. We're going to do a shout out for everybody just to wind down. Yeah, it's a four-cylinder, or four-stroke engine, Jeff. Thinker, Obsolete Optics. Good night, everybody. Blue Jay, Outpost. Kevin Blanche. Hi, Kevin. Dana Nasana, thanks again for moderating, Dana. Stephen Young, What Media. Hi, Stephen. Thank you again, Stephen. And James Lucid, thank you again, James. And Helen Caldecott supported the narrative. That's right. We play the video quite regularly around here. What Helen Caldecott done was just shockingly betrayal. It's a horrific betrayal. Her and Arnie Gunnison. Snakes and Doggies. Port Angeles. It's from Kevin Marble. I'm just scooting up through the names and quick shout out to people and to everybody else that sat back watching. Thank you. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far in the video. And this was a great show tonight, full of crazy shit from the retard nuclear industry, the degenerate genocide industry. Thinker, I go up to the top here. John Shiflett. Hi, John. Patrick. Richards. Jack Tripper. Savannah's Fourth. Angel's Place. I know Colette S. is out there somewhere. I got a tendency sometimes to start reading comments when I'm shouting out names. I try not to do it, but it happens. I save that for after, when I get a cup of tea after. As it settles down, everything's shut off, then I'll end up reading through the comments. And I don't think I got everybody in the comments section. Patrick, I think I already got, just in case I didn't. Don Vincent. I always seem to miss one or two people. It's never the same, but I always seem to miss one or two people when I read the comments after. Like, never called them out, yelled out hello to anybody. It's just when you're scrolling non-stop. Conrad Felix. We're getting there. We're almost down there. If I screw up, I screw up. Not much I can do. I'm not perfect. This is a long day today. But one step closer to getting everything working the way it's supposed to. It's a little stress when things don't work the way they're supposed to, particularly when you're doing what I'm doing, because there was no birds on the water out there today. That was like, wow. And, you know, the seagulls would normally pick up mussels and sea urchins at low tide and drop it on the roads, and there's nothing on the roads. And they're not reporting on these things missing. And the coastline is prolific for sea urchins and mussels during summer, spring, summer, and fall in the low tide. Danny San, I guess we'll call it a show right there. Yeah. Just double checking. Good stuff. Looks like I've done pretty good tonight on shout outs. Yeah, thank you, Stephen. No, Stephen, quite a few years now on top of that. We certainly talked a lot over the years on the phone, that's for sure. Okay, that's it for tonight, folks. There'll be another video tomorrow because I'm going back on, if the weather permitting, I'll be back on the water tomorrow. I got a few other things I can try with the engine. Engine running perfect, see? Outside of it's in reserve mode. I've had that happen before. We'll figure it out. I just don't understand why I'm having multiple problems at one time. Maybe because the system the engines haven't been used a lot recently and they're having issues. Who knows? God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. You might never get the chance to tell them again. So every day is an important day. God bless everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks.